possible. To all our participants, those who are here with us at the Jamaica House Banquet Hall, and those who are joining virtually via the World Wide Web, welcome. We have a very good program lined up for you today, so I invite you to stay until the very end. Before we go any further, let me invite Mr. Ranford Campbell, the GIS Projects Manager at the National Spatial Data Management Branch, to open for us in prayer. Mr. Campbell.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the opportunity as we channel these norms. Father, as we launch another GIS Awareness Week, as we, in this Executive Business Forum, remember our leaders, remember all the persons within our country, Jamaica. Father, we thank you for the pursuit of science, especially geospatial technology. We pray and we hope that we'll use them to make smart and meaningful decisions. We remember those pioneers and professionals who continue to use geospatial technology to chart the way forward. Father, as we inspire our young mind in our schools, in our universities and colleges, we pray, Lord, that we will continue to utilize geospatial technology to enhance our country, Jamaica, as we continue this day and forevermore. Amen.
Thank you for that prayer, Mr. Campbell. We will now be hearing greetings from Ms. Juliet Mayer, Chairman of the Land Information Council of Jamaica. She'll be followed by a pre-recorded greeting from Dr. Alwyn Hales, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment, and Climate Change. Ms. Mayer?
Ms. Patrine Cole, GIS Analyst, Planning Institute of Jamaica and Master of Ceremony. Dr. Alwyn Hales, Permanent Secretary within the Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Adam Reedy, National Government Business Manager for the Americas and the Caribbean Environmental Systems Research Institute, who is also our keynote speaker. Ms. Simone Lloyd and the hardworking team at the LICJ. Other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is a pleasure for me as my first official duty to address you as the new chair of the LICJ, the Land Information Council of Jamaica's board. The LICJ is very pleased that you have all joined us in celebrating Jamaica's 15th anniversary of the international community, in celebrating Geography Awareness Week and our 11th anniversary of locally staging the GIS Business Forum as the first of our 2 weeks of events and activities. This year, given the continued extenuating circumstances presented by COVID-19, our new normal, the Council thought it wise not to break the long-standing tradition of our local celebrations, but innovatively and with the strategic support of the Council's Geography Awareness Week Planning Committee and the National Spatial Data Management Branch, they have successfully planned and will be staging today's 11th GIS Business Executive as well as the 9th GIS Technical Seminar. Our annual Geography Awareness Week Thanksgiving Service and the 19th National GIS Day Exposition during these 2 weeks. So it's a full agenda that we have. But let me take this opportunity to extend a special welcome to our guest speaker, Mr. Adam Reedy, and our esteemed geospatial experts serving in different capacity during these 2 weeks, whether as Master of Ceremony, moderator, or the panelists for the panel discussion. As we embark on this National Business Executive Forum with this year's theme, Geospatial Technologies, Navigating the New Normal, we're honored that you consented to give of your invaluable time, to give your knowledge and your expertise for the benefit of all in attendance. Again, due to the extenuating circumstances, I want to take this opportunity to welcome the attendees that are joining us locally, regionally, and internationally through virtual means. The LICJ extends gratitude also to ESRI for its partnership and support over the past almost 30 years of Jamaica's GIS landscape development. Through the utilization of ArcGIS products and services under a new enterprise agreement with ESRI, the government of Jamaica will seek to apply geospatial information, tools, and technologies in resolving several issues: crime, health services provision, and for the greater economic growth and advancement of our country. This month, the Land Information Council of Jamaica celebrates its 29th anniversary. Our success is in no small measure to the invaluable service provided by our Secretariat, the National Spatial Data Management Branch. And so I thank them for their unwavering support and execution of the Council's projects and programs over these many years. Can we have a round of applause for them? Thank you. In addition to the loyal commitment displayed by our board, representatives, and member organizations in the public and private sector. The annual celebration of Geography Awareness Week and GIS Day to increase public awareness are major pursuits under the LICJ's projects and program committee, and as well the GIS in School Education program. It's very important. The Council invites your participation in the other 3 events we will be hosting this week and next week. In closing, I would like to thank our sponsors, the National Housing Trust, National Land Agency, and Real Decoy, without whom this year's event would not have been possible. And so we appreciate your long-standing and unwavering support. And finally, the solution to the multiplicity of national and global problems we are faced with lies within the ambit of geospatial technology. Be assured that effective use of GIS technology can lead to economic growth and sustainable development. I like how Jack Gangerman from ESRI puts it, and I quote, "The application of GIS is limited only by the imagination of those who uses it," unquote. With this in mind, I encourage you to engage our panelists, challenge your mind to think creatively and strategically so that together we can chart a course where geospatial technologies is utilized to navigate a Jamaica in which our new normal is more effectively and efficiently planned, powered, managed, and executed, making Jamaica the ideal place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. Enjoy the rest of the proceedings. Thank you.
We will now be hearing a pre-recorded greeting from Dr. Alwyn Hale.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to be here at this 11th hosting of the Executive Business Forum that's dedicated to geographic information systems and other forms of geospatial technologies. These technologies are critical to the day-to-day deliverables of a wide cross-section of ministries, departments, and agencies of the government of Jamaica. GIS technology is used by planners, business persons, academia, policymakers across our island and indeed around the world. Geospatial information dictates where we build, how we build, where we put necessary infrastructure to capitalize on and manage our resources. GIS has been an effective tool for the Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change and its agencies in the planning of developments as we seek to maintain the balance between the built and natural environments. In carrying out our mandate of building a climate resilient and sustainable Jamaica, we utilize geospatial technologies which are necessary to map, visualize, analyze, monitor, and sustainably manage the Earth and human societies. GIS allows for the layering of information, which represents a comprehensive profile on a particular area. We can look at the physical layout of the land, how it can be apportioned for development. GIS provides us with the ability to ascertain electronically the location of natural resources, enables us to design storage and electricity services, and establish whether an area is prone to flooding or other hazards. GIS helps us identify and allocate appropriate green spaces for recreational use and helps us understand if we have infringed and preserved natural habitats. It helps us to access our road networks, transportation services, and traffic congestion. We can look at the crime statistics of particular areas, determine access to hospitals and emergency response services, proximity to educational institutions, and employment opportunities, and the list goes on. This layering of information is vital when government takes into consideration the need of expanding population. The key to any kind of future for us and for the planet is to understand and make informed decisions about where we are headed. Geospatial information obtained through geographic information systems and other forms of geospatial technology is the key that will allow us to navigate the new normal, as the theme says, and allow us to make the kind of informed decision that will benefit all. If there is one thing that the past 2 years has taught us with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, is that change is inevitable. It provides us with both challenges and opportunities to grow and improve and to attract new members with new ideas. The new normal, in which we are all currently operating, has seen geospatial technology employed in the critical fight against COVID-19 by the Ministry of Health and Wellness, aided by the National Emergency Response GIS team, NERGIST, and coordinated by the National Spatial Data Management Division of this ministry, which is one of the divisions of MUREC. The division and the NERGIST team have assisted in developing various Jamaica COVID-19 related dashboards to support the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Efforts in mapping COVID-19 cases and supporting monitoring and deployment of resources across the island. The NSDMD continues to collaborate with the Ministry of Health and Wellness to facilitate updates to their GIS infrastructure, enhance mapping and analysis capabilities in relation to health hazards and future disease outbreaks. With the rapid increase in the use of virtual space and given the COVID-19 protocols, the NSDMD had also hosted a virtual Jamaica COVID-19 Geospatial Forum to provide a medium for experts across the world to share information and ideas on how geospatial technologies are used to assist in the containment and management of the COVID-19 pandemic, in addition to planning for life both during and after the pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic had reinforced the importance of various forms of these technologies and how they help us to better understand, communicate, engage, and operate in all spheres of our life. Our new normal will continue to be shaped and influenced by these technologies in the future, near and far. One of our proud achievements as a ministry has been the development of the National Spatial Information Technology Platform, otherwise known as NSPIT, a web-based visualization and planning tool designed to complement the National Spatial Plan through spatial analysis and modeling. It will allow users to better inform planning and development as well as investment decisions from a spatial perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, the Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change is committed to the injection of smart technology and innovation as we renew Jamaica. The use of geospatial technologies has increased significantly in both the public and private sectors over the past almost 30 years of Jamaica's GIS landscape development, as well as in the wider Caribbean region. The evidence of its enormous potential is overwhelming. The division continues to play a significant role in promoting the use of geospatial technology, particularly through raising awareness, training, and initiatives such as the NSPIT platform. Geospatial education and training opportunities for both public and private sector entities have provided the knowledge and skill sets necessary for more efficient and effective execution of their duty. Our varied collaborations with tertiary educational institutions have also aided geospatial capacity development as well as research projects and business ideas. I am pleased that here in Jamaica, a growing number of entities have bought into geospatial technology and are employing it to improve the way they work and do business. In that regard, the National Spatial Data Management Division has played a leading role in securing an enterprise license agreement with Environmental System Research Institute, ESRI, a global market leader in geographic information systems. The new agreement will provide GIS resources for over 265 government and quasi-government institutions, including 179 educational entities. I want to commend the Land Information Council of Jamaica and the National Spatial Data Management Division for the sterling work they have been doing to shape policy, provide strategic direction, and promote awareness and conduct training in GIS and related technology. I believe that in order to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business, geographic information systems and geospatial information management will have to play an even greater role to make this objective a reality. It is now my pleasure to declare this 11th GIS Business Executive Forum for 2021 open as the first of 4 events over the next 2 weeks for this year's National Geography Awareness Week and GIS Day celebrations, and wish for you a successful and insightful event.
We want to thank Dr. Hales for that warm greeting and for highlighting the use of geospatial technologies locally. We also want to thank Ms. Mayor for highlighting the work of the Land Information Council of Jamaica over the past 30 years. At this time, we will be hearing from our keynote speaker, Mr. Adam Reedy. He is the National Government Business Manager for the Americas, covering Canada, the Caribbean, and Latin America at ESRI. And I'm going to invite Ms. Nadisha Poyser the Senior GIS Manager and Trainer at the National Spatial Data Management Branch, to officially introduce Mr. Reedy. Ms. Poisel.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I stand here to introduce to you the keynote speaker for our 11th GIS Business Executive Forum, Mr. Adam Reedy. Adam Reedy is a 1995 graduate of the United States Air Force Academy with a Bachelor of Science degree in Engineering and Political Science. He has a master's degree in Aeronautical Science from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. As a USAF officer and pilot, Captain Reedy flew C-21 Learjets in the USAF, providing operational airlift support for senior military and federal officials, as well as flying time-sensitive medical evacuations out of Randolph Air Force Base, Texas, during his 10-year military career. Adam joined the Environmental Systems Research Institute, ESRI, in 2001 and has worked extensively over the last 20 years advising the United States and international defense, intelligence, public safety, emergency management, and other national government agencies on developing and implementing enterprise geospatial systems. Mr. Reedy is currently the ESRI National Government Business Manager for the Americas, covering Canada, the Caribbean, and Latin America. He resides in the Northern Kentucky or the Greater Cincinnati area with his wife and 4 kids. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Adam Reedy.
Good morning. Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Great. Let me begin sharing my presentation. And how is that? Are you able to see the slides in the full presentation mode?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. If you need me to stop, or if anything isn't working, please let me know while I'm in the presentation mode. I can't see your video, I don't think, and I probably won't see any chat. So just please interrupt me if something is not working. But wow, thank you so much for that very great and flattering introduction. It's really an honor to be invited to speak and be here virtually with you today. I want to thank the chairman, the permanent secretary, all of our distinguished guests for this invitation. As mentioned, ESRI, our distributor Spatial Innovision, and the government of Jamaica have had a long-standing relationship and a true partnership that we really value. And so it's just an honor to be invited and participate in this event as you kick off your GIS Day activities. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started into the presentation. So the theme of your event this week, talking about GIS and the new normal.
Reedy, please turn
and
on your
as
camera.
we, yes, go ahead.
Please turn on your camera.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for that. And how's that? Can you see my video? Okay.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right. I'll continue. So as we think about facing challenges in improving our government in this new normal that we're all sort of thrown into and learning as we go, GIS is really at the forefront. And this digital transformation through GIS is really what's helping us to enable us and adapt and prosper in this new normal. And throughout this pandemic and this new environment, this new normal that we've come to find ourselves in, our world continues to be challenged because we as humans in many ways have been living somewhat recklessly on occasions and somewhat unsustainably, and this is really threatening our future. We have human-induced climate changes and overpopulation, and these are resulting in interconnected patterns of change and steep declines in biodiversity and many other factors. We read about these and we hear scientists telling us about them almost every day. And we as just the general population, and maybe more importantly, we as GIS professionals here today are responsible in many ways for our planet's future. And clearly, GIS is enabling this digital transformation, and it's happening through what we call the geographic approach. The idea of applying geographic knowledge with the tools that we use for measuring and visualizing and analyzing, making predictions, and then planning and acting and making decisions based on all of that information. GIS and this geographic approach really provide the framework for applying this integrated geographic knowledge widely across all areas of government to make better decisions. And GIS is also increasingly becoming interconnected. It's creating a geospatial infrastructure for us. We're connecting our systems, and this in turn is helping us collaborate and work together better. It's helping us share, and it's helping us, it's transforming our workflows and our decision making at all scales. And the geospatial infrastructures, it's not just about transforming our systems and workflows, but it's transforming our organizations. It's creating a whole new kind of intelligent infrastructure, and not just a digital infrastructure, not just water and road and sewer infrastructure, but it's creating a new kind of infrastructure for organizing and making available distributed data that we collect. At the heart of this geospatial infrastructure are the shared geospatial services. These are organized through portals for discovery and become accessible by applications that support all types of users across government. And this geospatial infrastructure is integrating all kinds of data. We can integrate data like tabular data, real-time data, imagery, and many others. And maybe more importantly, it's not just integrating the data, but it's abstracting information and that data into web maps and layers and scenes that can be used in many different applications and maps for other users. So we've come to realize that location cannot be an afterthought. Our governments are experiencing immense pressures from many different directions to respond to and solve these challenges that we face. And these challenges become our business drivers. Location plays a critical role in everything that government does. This is evident in everything from long-range planning to asset management to public safety response and addressing citizen requests. When we bring this complex data together within a geospatial information system, it becomes easier to understand, to analyze, and ultimately to act on. And smart communities thrive when location is at the forefront of all operations. Our GIS has become the foundation technology and is critical for all aspects of our government operations. Geospatial infrastructure really delivers these powerful apps in the form of desktop applications, of course, for our traditional GIS users, but also more and more as applications used for collecting and disseminating data for massive mobile deployments, as well as web apps delivered through things like dashboards and story maps and infographics. And this is transforming our national mapping and foundation data agencies all around the world, making their data more important, more accessible, more relevant to what governments are doing. And the proliferation and consumption of these web maps is skyrocketing. Literally trillions of maps are being looked at all over the world. And this isn't just transforming our technology and the workflows, but it's transforming our people. and our teams and every aspect of the way our organizations are working together. So through this digital transformation, by implementing it, we can modernize and make our cities, our communities, our countries smarter and safer. And when we think about this new normal, there are really three particular areas that are critical and were pointed out earlier this morning during some of the introductions. So I want to focus on just a few of these today and the rest of the presentation, these major challenges that we see all over the world and obviously there in Jamaica as well when it comes to health, public safety, and economic development. So let's start with health, right? We're all aware of the challenges we face today in this current pandemic. And of course, our COVID response is at the forefront of our health challenges, being able to track cases, manage testing sites and vaccine distribution. But we're also starting to reopen in some ways. We see signs of improvement, and we need to be able to manage how that happens. And we still have to be prepared for other public health issues that we know we're going to face in our normal business and normal lives. And ultimately, governments need to continue to improve and provide better access to care for everyone. So if we look at some examples, obviously COVID has affected almost all of us directly, and sadly, more than 5 million people around the planet have died as a result of this horrible disease. Our users have helped the world better understand what's going on in their part of the world and globally. We see here one of the examples, the great work by Johns Hopkins University, which continues to keep track of what's going on. Their dashboard has been viewed more than 2 trillion times. So not only are we better informed, but as the visualization here in the middle, for example, shows, we've been able to look at and identify patterns. And some of the examples here are just showing some of the dynamics, for example, what happened in Europe during the winter months of the pandemic, or some site selection for vaccination or return to office management. And other examples mapping every case and setting up quarantine zones to try to shut the pandemic down. So we've seen patterns emerge as we deploy our solutions in impactful ways to respond to COVID-19. And we can apply these same patterns to other health challenges and other ways that we're supporting our communities and our countries. So throughout this pandemic, if we're going to gain anything from these challenging times, it's going to be these lessons learned and how we apply to make ourselves more resilient and more responsive going forward. And these patterns, for example, I'll talk about now, mapping and monitoring, doing analysis, performing strategic planning, and communicating with maps are all repeatable. So first, if we look at mapping and monitoring, I mentioned it, I assume all of us are familiar with the Johns Hopkins site, the world famous dashboard that, once they put out a tweet that this was live, the whole team at Esri looked at this and were just really impressed by its clarity of message and how important this type of information was to share across the world, and to have this updated, reliable picture of what's happening everywhere. Next, if we talk about analysis, analyzing relationships and gaps. Well, a common analytic function for health is all about understanding gaps in services or health outcomes by figuring out who is more or less likely to be affected by some health challenge, whether it's COVID or something else. And those that are more likely to be effective are considered our vulnerable populations. And once we can run the analysis and identify those vulnerable populations, we can begin to make smarter decisions about how we allocate resources to better support those people. And for strategic planning, well, there's 2 staples of geographic problem solving in health, or site selection and calculating geographic accessibility for places. These methods have been used for things like standing up new testing and vaccination sites, for distributing food and resources, and extending healthcare services in places where hospital capacity might become overwhelmed at some point. And finally, we talk about communicating, using maps to tell stories. We've developed For example, the coronavirus vaccine outreach solution to help keep the public informed. The idea is to provide clear information about the vaccination process. This example is built with ArcGIS Hub and a bunch of integrated apps that allow residents to have access to the latest information in real time about where to get tested, where to get vaccinated. And there are hundreds of these hubs all over the world created and being used by government organizations. So the next area that I want to talk a little bit about is public safety. Today, GIS is used all across areas of emergency communication, emergency management, fire, rescue, emergency services, of course, homeland security. One of the biggest challenges all governments are facing is how to reduce crime and protect their citizens and their visitors in their countries. And I think it's clear we are definitely safer today because of GIS. And law enforcement, people are looking at historic crime rates to discover patterns and allocate resources accordingly. They're monitoring crime in real time, looking at everything from major crimes and local geographies all the way to monitoring global security risks. Emergency management organizations shown here in some examples are using GIS to pick the right locations for their facilities based on drive times and to be able to respond more effectively. And in the field of disaster preparedness and response, GIS has had a long history. Obviously, these examples here are just showing some of the modern work that's happening, things like looking at ground deformation near volcanoes, but whether it's fighting wildfires in real time or doing assessments of fire risk or doing damage assessment from floods and severe weather, GIS is playing a significant and major role. And today, all over the world, we have police agencies using ArcGIS to power these modern policing strategies that include things like CompStat, hotspot policing, evidence-based policing, and community-based policing, just to name a few. The types of analysis happening here, it allows us to better understand where, when, why crimes are happening, and then be able to predict where they're going to happen in the future and take the action to apply resources and strategies to help reduce that crime and keep our communities safer. And the power of ArcGIS and this area of law enforcement is really that it's providing one integrated system that can support all these critical missions to solve problems. Everything from real-time crime analysis to sharing information and commuting with executives through dashboards, managing large events, and ultimately engaging with the citizens of your community. Now, lastly, the third area I want to talk about is economic development. And with the challenges Jamaica and other governments all over the world are facing regarding things like tourism in the midst of a pandemic, they're able to use GIS and support strategies for things like destination branding and analyzing the retention and expansion of businesses and ultimately developing best practices for sustainable growth. So if we look at some examples, GIS continues to grow and be hugely beneficial in areas of business and economic development. These examples here show things like optimizing delivery routes, cutting carbon, picking the right locations to avoid things like multi-hazard insurance, or picking the right sites, the right territories. All these are very powerful, not just in business, but increasingly in government as well, to target economic development sectors of various types. And governments all over the world are using GIS to manage land information, land records, their parcel data. These are the foundation for so much of our civil society. But it's not just about managing the boundaries and doing the system of record that's shown here. It's the application of those records, integrating it with other layers like soils, floodplains, to be able to do more rational property assessments. And governments are also working in areas of urban design and planning to be able to create sustainable futures in our cities. In the far right, there's examples in Germany working on creating a sustainable urban footprint. Others are updating urban plans shown here, like the city of Paris, just visualizing what's going on, creating new patterns of development, and doing it in such a way that is sustainable and administratively correct. And we have solutions like ArcGIS Urban that are helping connect both our public and our private sectors by providing common data models that are available for representing urban change, for example, providing a place for multidisciplinary teams to work together, improving decision-making, and helping to eliminate uncertainty. And this works across all scales, from regional and urban information models right down to architecture design. So to start wrapping up, I think we can all agree governments need a geospatial strategy to do this. And the strategy needs to include some of these following elements, really. The foundation, all government agencies must embrace GIS as a platform and location as a foundational thought process. And the approach has to be united. Together, key agencies need to define their goals, their priorities, their needs, and you have to have the system in place. Do you have the necessary hardware, the software, the people with the right skill sets to achieve the goals you've identified? And ultimately, to implement, developing a plan that can help roll out specific applications and solutions to match the goals and objectives that were identified. And to do that, we go through this journey to create a geospatial strategy. And it's a complex process, but it's really, basic sort of simple steps to just first understanding the business needs and the challenges that GIS can support in your government. Then coming up with a plan to have the right people, the processes, and the technology and solutions to make it happen, and then to act on those methods for implementation and success. But in the end, this is clearly more than just technology. It's really about GIS professionals like yourselves. You are essential to this. You need to provide the leadership, working together, doing all the necessary work to apply this geographic approach at scale for a real digital transformation to help us navigate this new normal. And integrating geographic science and holistic thinking into virtually everything that you do ultimately will help create a sustainable future. And so in closing, I'll just share a quote from E.O. Wilson, one of the greatest and most impactful scientists of our time. And he had this to say, that we only have a short time to decide our future. We're in a race to save our living environment. And we need to take this personally to have a chance at reversing the current trends that we see. And as GIS professionals, you have the ability to share and communicate your work successfully to others, not just within your own organization, but beyond. So continue to build great maps that tell stories, because they really open up the eyes for others to understand the urgency of the work that you're doing and to help create more sustainable solutions. So thank you for your time. Again, this was a great privilege for me to join you today virtually. My only, I'm just sorry I couldn't be there in person, and I look forward to seeing continued improvement around the world, and hopefully it won't be long before I can come and work and see you all in person and continue to support you with the partnership from Esri and Spatial Innovation with the government of Jamaica. So thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Addressing the digital transformation through GIS. Thank you for showing us how GIS is enabling the digital transformation by providing a framework to apply geographic knowledge through, among other things, intelligent infrastructure and apps and maps that address public health and safety issues. For example, the COVID-19 monitoring and response dashboards, case monitoring, surveillance, and quarantine management. Thank you for also highlighting the importance and the need for national geographic strategies for us to achieve maximum impact. Thank you, Mr. Reedy. We are now at the end of our opening ceremony. I want to thank you for staying with us thus far, and I encourage you to continue to stay with us as we now go through a panel discussion. Our panel discussion will be led by Mrs. Natalie Ennis-Palmer, and she will be speaking with some key players in the local geospatial business arena. Ms. Palmer.
Okay, hi. Morning once again. I'm Natalie Ennis-Palmer, who will be the moderator for this session. And we have our panelists here. We should have someone else joining us online as well. However, in the meantime, we'll continue the robust discussion, transitioning from what Mr. Adam Reedy had presented. He presented some very valid points and how GIS, geospatial technologies, can be applied to the different fields. And so I'll ask our panelists just to introduce themselves before we continue with the discussion.
Starting here. Okay, you guys, good morning, everyone. Am I audible? You guys hearing me? Okay. I am Marlon Heinz, manager of Home and Entertainment and Fixed Networks at Digicel Group.
Good morning, everyone. First, let me extend thanks to the LICJ for the invitation and the opportunity to speak and share my experience in GIS with you here today, as well as those joining us in cyberspace. I am Josette Smith-Scott. I am the GIS analyst for the Jamaica National Group. At GIS, our major technologies that we use there are GIS and GPS technology. My background, I tend to think, is a nice mix of natural sciences along with social sciences, as I hold a bachelor's degree in geography and a master's in marketing and data analytics, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Luke Buchanan, and I'm the Senior Projects Manager at the Mona Geoinformatics Institute. I have a significant experience in the geospatial sciences, as I have been working in this field for over 15 years, focusing on the environmental and the commercial side as well. I'm really looking forward to our discussion today, since even the way we're organized today is we're in the new normal. So I'm really looking forward to that discussion. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sheldon Small, and I'm with Real Decoy. There, I work as a software engineer and technical consultant. I focus mainly on geospatial technologies, building web map applications and extracting data in order to present it in a meaningful way so that persons can get value from that data. I'm really looking forward to this discussion, and hopefully we can share the information and we all can benefit from it.
Okay, I want to thank our panelists. They have introduced themselves. I don't know if we have the additional person online yet? Okay, so he'll join us as we continue with the discussion. So thanks again for joining us, the panelists, and you have introduced yourselves and you have brought to the fore highlighting some aspects of how you use geospatial technology. But can we delve a little deeper in understanding what are some of the geospatial technologies and tools, and give us an in-depth understanding of how you use GIS in your organizations? And we could probably start with Mr. Sheldon Small.
With regards to the question that you had asked, in terms of what are geospatial tools or technologies, these are a range of technologies that you can utilize to acquire data or location intelligent data. The types of tools that we tend to utilize, say for instance a total station or a GPS device in order to collect the information on ground. We also store that data in a database. Then we mine that data to be able to extract that information, process that data, analyze it, and present it in a way that persons can get meaningful information from it, a way that persons can see how that physical data relates to human beings, and how we can actually benefit from that and use that to actually, push a sustainable future as we move along. So those are the range of tools that we tend to utilize. It stems from physical devices that we have to where we even utilize applications on the internet, and also to utilize mobile devices to collect that information too as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Small. And just for a matter of clarity, I'd ask that if you could shift the mask a bit while answering, just so the audience could hear us a little better. And I thank you for that answer in terms of the private sector. I know we make use of geospatial technologies in both the public and private sector, a general response to how we use it in our daily activities. Mr. Luke Buchanan, could we have a synopsis of how you use the geospatial technology, how it's applied to your daily activities?
All right, thank you. Thank you for that question. So within the realm of geospatial technologies, we can look at geomatics, which deals with the capturing, the storing, the processing, and making the GIS data available for use for the general public, for experts or non-experts. In terms of geospatial technologies, there are different categories that we can look at. So we can look at GIS, that deals with web, desktop GIS, web mapping, as well as mobile GIS. We can look at GPS as well, which has emerged as one of the most important technologies. So during the pandemic, for example, we have seen where food deliveries has become very, very important. And those bike riders that are delivering food, navigation is very important to them. And GPS navigation is the backbone of that technology. And we look at scanning. If you look at companies like Tesla, where they are developing, and other traditional car companies like BMW and Mercedes, they are looking at self-driving cars that they're investing a lot of money in. And the technology that is behind it is LiDAR, which is also a geospatial technology. And then you look at Earth observations, you look at satellite imagery. Satellite is very expensive, so now people are moving towards using more drones. And in a social distancing situation, a lot of people have moved towards using drones for overhead mapping versus going into communities. So those are some of the ways in which geospatial technologies are being used now. And definitely at Mona Geoinformatics, we're using most of those technologies.
Okay, and so far we can see how the technology has been helping us, has been enhancing our daily activities throughout this pandemic. And moving to a little closer home in the banking sector, I wonder how many of us know or knew that GIS has been a part of the backbone of the banking sector. We'll have Mrs. Josette Smith-Scott enlighten us on that.
Okay, so thank you, Natalie. At Jamaica National, our mission is really to use innovative solutions to unleash the potential of our people. And the use of GIS, we believe, is an innovative way to solve some of the problems that we face, as well as inform some of the decisions that we are making. And during the pandemic, some of the, I think probably the key decision or issue we've been faced with is that of risk assessment. And what are our customers experiencing, what our staff members are experiencing, and how can we at JN help the wider community. And so with the GIS, through the technologies of GPS mapping and using ArcGIS Desktop, we have used GIS to help us to, particularly at the beginning of the pandemic when we had isolated community lockdowns, to figure out how many of our staff members are actually captured or rendered unable to move because of these lockdowns, and how do we deploy staff to fill the gaps that arise because of that. Another thing that we've been looking at is actually overlaying our locations with COVID hotspots in terms of communities, and this has helped us in trying to forecast what possible infection rates are going to be among staff that use a particular location, as well as how will we protect our customers in terms of the density of customers in the branches, the sanitization of the branches, which locations do we need to be focusing our attention on, and so on. And then for the wider community, JN has always been big on community development as well as giving back to the community. And so we thought that it is important for us to help with the vaccination drive. And so we have used GIS to help us in picking out vaccination sites by looking at where do most of our customers live and how can we contribute by extending the network of sites that the government actually has in place. And recently we had a vaccination site set up in Petersfield in Westmoreland, and it was really some of the GIS data that we used that helped us in determining that this was a good site for us.
Okay, I want to thank you, Josette, for that. And we can see that they have not only used the GIS and geospatial technologies in-house, but on a broader scale to include the community, the staff, on a wholesale kind of way. And how many of us can do without our phones these days? No matter the network, we get up each morning, we step out of the house, and if we leave the cell phone, we're turning back. We cannot survive without the cell phones. And so we have a representative here, Mr. Marlon Heinz from Digicel Jamaica, if he could give us some idea of how they apply the geospatial technologies in the Digicel.
All right. Morning again, everyone. Marlon Heinz here to give you some idea of how we utilize the geospatial tools or softwares within Digicel. We utilize these softwares or these technologies, I would say, vastly throughout the organization. Mostly would start with the GIS department, and we liaise with other departments to ensure that there's some understanding on different locations and how we actually move into these locations. So as a part of some of the service response to COVID-19 pandemic, we liaise with different departments, for example, sales and construction, to ensure that we would be able to detect and show by spatial location customers that are presently active, where we may have customers as a result of being home more readily, utilizing more packages or more data, requesting more bandwidth, and for those areas where we may have customers or data representing sites or locations where these are not yet presently Digicel Plus customers. So we utilize these data sets to be aware of these locations, to be able to make specific decisions on different elements that we may be able to use to feed these locations, and also how we determine new areas that we may actually go into as far as future planning and bridging the digital divide between those areas that are outside of reach and those that are inside, those that are especially on the parameters of our network footprint, and seeing how it's best to actually ensure that our services are going out to all of these customers.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Small. And Mr. Small highlighted the issue of location. So during the pandemic, we weren't always able to go to the physical office, the spot where we're used to having our computers, everything sitting around. And so organizations would have been required to make some form of adjustment. Many of us would have been working from home throughout the pandemic. And I throw it out there to find out how is it that, your organizations adjusted with the work from home activities. Ms. Josette?
Okay, so work from home definitely is a part of the new normal for us. And at the beginning of the pandemic, some companies within our group were able to do it quicker than others based on IT infrastructure and so on. But the reality for Jamaica National is that work from home will be a permanent part of the solution for us. So there are some people who will never return to office. And so what we have had to do is look at our buildings and start to engage in proper space planning. How are we best utilizing our buildings? What are the expenses that we're incurring for buildings that probably will be half empty, and so on. And geospatial technologies, in terms of mapping and so on, can give you a wider perspective in terms of where are these locations, what are the occupancy levels, and how do we consolidate our space and get greater efficiencies. But one thing that I think I'm particularly excited about that has not yet happened, but it's trying to manage staff that are actually working from home in terms of probably, if I could think about my friend here at Digicel, Mr. Heinz, how has the performance of bandwidth affected us in terms of our productivity? Because in what was previously normal to us, we were all on the same building and we had the same experiences with bandwidth. But now Jamaica National has over 2,000 staff members that are deployed to various locations. So how over time has their connectivity issues impacted productivity? And if we can map that to see who are the people who probably will have to come back into office because connectivity is not necessarily sustainable, and as well as who are the people where it works well for. So that's something that we will know over time, having collected and studied the data. So that's something very interesting that we can look forward to.
I want to thank you so much for that response. And I know for some of the employees in the different organizations, hearing that they won't have to actually go back to that physical space is joy to them, is not joy to some. And I mean, it's a different level of joy between the staff, the employers, and the employees. But these different organizations are on different scales, large, medium, I wouldn't go and say as small, probably developing. And so from a different angle, I would like Mr. Small to also enhance or bring to the fore how the work from home or the pandemic itself would have impacted your GIS operations.
Thank you for that question. With regards to working from, sorry about that. With regards to working from home, that was a part of our culture. So we usually have where it is that persons would work half of the week from home or parts of the week from home. And we also had a distributed team because we have offices in Canada and US as well. So we're able to work across regions. So adapting our methodologies and our practices to the new norm, as you would have it, it wasn't as difficult as it could have been because we're partially practicing that already. In terms of how we collect data, we usually do that in a remote way, in the sense that we do a lot of data mining. So the information that we'd collect would be through sensors that would set up in buildings. Say for instance, one of the applications that we tend to work with, it's a people flow application where we do indoor mapping. So a lot of it, we could have collected that data from a remote location. We didn't necessarily have to go on the site. Once we set up the different devices that we have there, open up a gateway and we start to pull in that information. So it was somewhat of a smooth transition, moving from the direct face-to-face in office, moving into a remote way of working. We also had the infrastructure that was there already set up to be able to, put reports in terms of how we're working, our performances, and key metrics like that. We were able to track those too as well, so that we could continue to improve. I will say though that even though that would have been in place from an infrastructural standpoint and from a cultural standpoint, as you had mentioned before, not everyone would have been used to working from home the entire week. So that can also cause mental stress. So that is something that we also have to really, take focus on to really, put some importance on that too as well. And from the collection of the data side now, in how we go about analyzing data like that, we can also map those type of data in terms of, which companies are facing, that hiccups in terms of moving from that face-to-face into the new norm that we're living in now. And actually geospatial technologies can map that. As mentioned before, with the people flow technology, we can now start to map office spaces and how persons are distributed throughout the office, to ensure that we continue to carry out best practices and to take our fellow person into consideration, making sure that we work in a safe manner so that we can continue to push forward.
Okay, so we see here that Mr. Small, based on his operations, which were not so small, as he highlighted, the global spread of his operations, he was pretty much prepared for this pandemic. So while others of us might have been panicking, how do I adjust to this work from home? He was already there. In terms of collecting data, the data mining, I know for other organizations, it would have been a lot of field work, a lot of going outside. We could now no longer go outside since the pandemic. And so for Mr. Buchanan, if you could address the same question, how would the pandemic have impacted your operations?
Well, the pandemic, I would say, would have had significant impacts, in a negative and a positive way. I also want to point out to our audience that I'm always of the opinion that geography is the most important science. And I use an example. If you run an online business, you may say, well, I don't need a location, but actually you do. Because if you're going to deliver a product, then you have to tell your client to meet you somewhere. That's location. Well, some will say, well, my deliverable or my product is virtual. But if you're going to register your business, when you go to the business office, they're going to need a physical address. Again, that's locations. So it doesn't matter. One of the good things about GIS is that we have been able to apply to all professions. So a doctor can come to us for GIS services, a lawyer, a teacher. And to address the question, one of the first things that we did when the pandemic started was to do an assessment of our resources. So we know that we realized that we needed increased bandwidth. For those that will be working from home, some needed additional support in terms of equipment, laptops, increasing of their internet bandwidth at home and stuff like that. So in terms of the office side of things, we had to invest in additional power backup, because if you're going to log into the computers virtually, then they need to be running. In terms of our training programs, we had to quickly transform some of our content into videos, because you still would have to interact with students. And to impart the knowledge, you have to create videos so you can actually stream them when you're using doing your virtual lectures. In terms of the opportunities, what we found, and Josette from JN Group mentioned this, was that our opportunity in the pandemic was that a lot of companies were coming to us to do an assessment of their staff and their customers geospatially to see how the rates of infections would impact their customers and their workers. So there was significant opportunity there for us.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And I'm happy that you mentioned the issue of location. Location has been a core idea in the whole geospatial aspect of things applied to the different fields. The different companies, as mentioned before, for Digicel, Mr. Marlon Heinz, working from home. How was that? How has it impacted your operations if you were able to work from home, any at all?
Okay. All right. The scenario of working from home, I wouldn't say impacted our productivity so much, as we had a situation where we would have been initially working from remote desktops to actually be able to utilize our systems. So in the advent where we needed to now work from home and spend most of our times being home, we didn't have so much trouble in terms of transitioning over to that state of work. What I would say is, however, as a team, we would usually somewhat huddle over some system issues or limitations that we may face. And as a result of being virtual, we have kind of lost that. I'm not saying that a phone call or a Zoom call is too far away, but the actual physical camaraderie that we would have had is somewhat downplayed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Mr. Heinz brought up being able to work from home, but what happens to your data? So you are now at home, your data is open, possibly. What are some of the measures that you had to put in place to ensure that this was protected? It was not just out there for hackers or unscrupulous persons.
Okay. So as I was mentioning before, there are a number of systems that the organization has put in place and holds as mandatory for the staff to actually utilize. So in order to utilize our work laptops or to actually have access to the different platforms, we have to go through a Digicel created platform. One Login is the name of it, and it is secured in terms of the users, your passwords, and how you actually integrate yourself into the system. What I will say, however, is in not using on-premises securities and being at home working, now we're utilizing our own Wi-Fi connection and not that connection of the on-premises that would have more security in its own setup. So as far as the protection of the data and databases and the different services that we utilize on the day-to-day, that is where I see somewhat of a hang-up in terms of the actual and overall security.
Okay, and thank you for that. And continuing on the aspect of security, we'll have Ms. Josette also tell us if she was impacted. You know, it has to do with money, and we have to make sure that our money is secure at all times. And so if you could tell us if you had to make any significant changes. You mentioned that many of the staff now will be able to work from home.
Yes, so at Jamaica National, at the start of the pandemic, what we did was we had an assessment of, so you had to do a questionnaire really, and an assessment in terms of what's the infrastructure that you have, as well as the environment in which you're going to be working. It was a lot of discussions with you and your supervisor in terms of how conducive is your home environment to working from home. And following that assessment, it was either decided that you would come back into office or you could work from home. But what we have done is first we have increased the number of cybersecurity training sessions that we have among staff. Normally we would do annual cybersecurity training. Now we're doing training every 3 months. Another thing is you cannot access the network outside of the VPN. you're also encouraged not to use, or you cannot access the JN network with your personal devices. So only JN approved and authorized devices can be used to access our network. And as you know, as it relates to financial services, it is not just your money that is important or will get us into regulatory issues. If that becomes exposed, it's also your personal information. So information such as your address, and your address information is really what we use in GIS mapping and so on. So we are encouraged not to save customers' information on your machine, as well as we have to de-identify the data. So we do not associate your information with your address. So you, for example, Natalie, would be customer number 1. So that's some of the ways that we've tried to de-identify the data to ensure that if there should ever be any data breach, then people cannot tie it back to you and try to steal their identity and stuff like that. So it's really about consistently trying to reinforce cybersecurity awareness through training, as well as continuous consultation with your supervisor to ensure that we're always doing the right thing.
Okay, thank you. We see the whole issue of cybersecurity coming out here from Josette, and I'm sure it is a concern for the different organizations, both public and private. Luke brought up that they had to convert some of their offerings online. A lot of companies are afraid of online. When you hear online, you hold your data close to heart. This is what you use to make money for your organization. And I would pose to Luke, to Mr. Buchanan, you know, were you forced now to offer products online that you were uncomfortable with doing before, and how did you adjust?
No, we weren't uncomfortable. Some of the things that we're doing, we actually started before, but as a lot of people would agree, the pandemic kind of confirmed a lot of the things that we were scared about. Some of the biggest, one of the biggest company in the world, Amazon, their biggest part of, one of the largest part of their business, apart from warehousing, is their software, which is online. So we can't be afraid of that. I mean, digital is here. That is their business. They enable transactions online. And geospatial services, a lot of our deliverables are really files or a document. Unless you want to print the document, does it become something physical? So it's already conducive to doing business online. So what we have done at Mona Geoinformatics is embrace that. And one of the things I realize now is that, let's say somebody invites you for a meeting in Crossroads at 11 a.m. In the old normal, what we used to do, we would prepare for the meeting, get there for 10:30, then somebody's late. The meeting actually starts 11:30. It's a long meeting. By 1:30, you go to lunch. By the time you go back to office, it's just, you can only send one email and the day is done. Those are things of the past, and in the new normal, we should extend that, and even when the pandemic is no more, then we have to do things more efficiently, and online is definitely going to support that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sheldon Small, I know you highlighted the fact that you were always, or for the most part, online, but were there any changes you had to adapt in terms of your offerings to customers and clients, and how did you go about that?
Thanks for that question. So, as mentioned before, I think Josette also touched on the point as well in terms of security training. We had to ensure that we upped that to ensure that we did more security training, not just on a yearly basis, but also multiple times throughout the year. We also strived as well to become SOC 2 compliant, so that the way in which we carried out our procedures was also up to a particular standard, so that we could be accountable for that. We have clients that also have security concerns too as well. So we have to ensure that the way in which we handle their data and the way in which we handle their assets, we have to do it in a secure way. So in terms of how we access our applications, generally do it through a VPN, or we ensure that the cloud services that we utilize is done in a secured way and at a high standard. So we had to ensure that each and every individual within the organization was not just aware of that, but had security training to ensure that the way in which they carried out their practices, they could be held accountable for that, and they do it at a high standard. So we were used to some of those things before, but we had to ensure that we improved on those standards that we wanted to implement across the organization, especially the fact that we had mentioned before, we're a distributed team, and most of what we do is online. So more than ever, we had to ensure that we were carrying out all the best practices.
Okay, thank you. We continue with Mr. Marlon Heinz from Digicel. Forgive me if I forget your name. But we have always been using the GIS for quite some time. We have been used to our skills. You know, you add to a page, you make a map. It has the basic elements as required. What are some of these new skills that you would have acquired since the pandemic? New GIS skills? Are there any tools in particular that you are now able to use or navigate because of the pandemic the past 2 years or a year and a half?
Well, I believe before the advent of COVID pandemic, we've been utilizing the systems the same. Within the new normal, I believe there is a rush for us to be more data-driven, and as such, we move into those areas of utilizing data more. And what I believe is there has been more of a raise of awareness in GIS for the everyday person in how they would utilize the systems. And as such, I believe there has been skills emerging in the regular public, such as remote sensing, data collection or data gathering, data mining, and as part of the organization, I would say service or server management would be something that I would speak to, definitely, that has emerged since the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic. To speak back to the remote sensing, on the regular, someone may not be looking at themselves to say they are GIS oriented, but I believe that on the daily we carry out a number of queries and a number of remote sensing exercises. Let us say you're looking for a new accommodation to spend your time over the weekend. You're not just going to your favorite places anymore. You're trying to find places that now offer foods that you may be interested before a certain time that they close of the day. So you're actually carrying out a lot of GIS operations without being aware that you are now GIS oriented. So I would say a part of the public space is where more of the skills have been emerging and more changes have been made. As far as the personnel that would be a part of the industry and utilizing the different databases and platforms, it's just more data, more efficiency, and being driven towards the whole network data being complete.
Okay, thank you. So I'll pose the same question to Ms. Joseph.
Okay, thank you, Natalie. In terms of emerging GIS skills that have been really brought about due to the challenges that we're facing with the pandemic and how we've been using the GIS technology in JN, we really have been using generally the same things, but we've been using them definitely more frequently, so we've been called on a lot more to support decision making. What some of the things that have been emerging are actually, we have to find ways to make the GIS output more interactive as well as more understandable to the end user, because now they're really paying attention. And while it is, as Marlon said, they're becoming more aware as well as learning how to use geospatial technologies and the outputs from it, we actually have a role to play in ensuring that it is very intuitive and easy for them. So we have had to turn to things like web maps to publish some of the outputs. So using ArcGIS Online is something that we use at JN, where you can give persons a login so that they can not necessarily just look at a static map anymore, but they can actually interact with the layers of data that you have actually produced for them to use. So it's really about trying to come up with ways to ensure that the end user fully understands what we are presenting, as well as enabling them to get more information at one point. So dashboard reporting is something that we have not necessarily been using at JM, but I've seen a lot of it being used in the wider scale in terms of tracking infection rates, looking at infrastructure and so on on a more global level.
Thank you. I'm happy that you mentioned ArcGIS Online, web map, the portal. So this is going to be our new normal. I hope you realize that. So no longer will we be getting these paper-based static maps. We're now able to stay, in our own locations, make an order, make a request for data or maps is presented across the online portal, the web map. For Mr. Buchanan, I know most of the work, the ArcGIS work we do, is using the Esri suite of products. Since the pandemic, have you had to employ other geospatial tools, softwares, applications?
Yes, we do use ArcGIS Online, but we have a team of developers, and we definitely use a lot of open source. So this would be an unnamed product, but it's just making use of any kind of background web map that is out there. So you can look at OpenStreetMap or Mapbox, stuff like that. And then you have your software developers build on top of that. I'm sure Mr. Small could expound more on that. In terms of other skills that we see emerging, for example, in GIS training programs, you would normally use handheld GPS devices to do your GPS training. Now you find yourself moving towards having the student using mobile apps. So there are a lot of free apps available. The paid ones are better, of course, but there are a lot of apps that are available. So when you reach your data collection practicals, then you can have your students using their own mobile phones, and that will also promote not moving devices around, because we have to social distance and all of that. In terms of delivery of goods and services, we find that we are doing greater analytics because companies like Grace Kennedy that we work with, and Honey Buns, companies like that, they're using GIS to help them to deliver their goods more efficiently, Jerry and Nephew, people like that. And we have been increasing our analytics in terms of helping with demand and supply chain management, stuff like that.
And I'll invite Mr. Small to add his bit to the conversation here.
So with regards to what has just been spoken about with regards to the type of application that we utilize, we make heavy usage of open source applications, and we use proprietary as well. We touched on before was Mapbox. So it's usually based on what the client, either they have been utilizing that particular platform before, and they would want to get expertise in how they could visualize that data, and how they could compare that data to some other type of data and how it relates to one another. So we would come in and we would build on top of their base platform. Mapbox would have been one of them that would have built on top of, in order to bring that data to life so that they could get information from that, analyze that data. Previous to being at Reedy, I would have also worked on applications with NWC under the NRW project. And I wanted to touch on that because we utilize discipline in terms of different technology that we use. We use Esri as well for the mapping application to map the entire water distribution network, but we also integrated that with other open source and other proprietary softwares so that whatever it is that we weren't able to get from Esri products, then we could get from those two as well. So a lot of integration tends to take place. One of those type of applications is FME, which is a feature manipulation engine. What that allows for you to do is to take data from different silos, meaning that these particular data stores, they're not connected to any other type of application. They're segregated. So we want to be able to integrate them with other systems. So that provides like a service bus, almost like a train station where data comes from multiple different areas, come to that area. You transform it, you extract it, you process it, and you produce it in a meaningful way that other applications can actually take that data now and actually display it in a way, or you can utilize for other processing too as well. So that's one of the other applications that we use. That's a proprietary application. Open source applications now that we've utilized, we have Tangram, we have leaflet.js. GeoServer is another one that you can use to build out an entire enterprise level GIS application. So there are a lot of options that are out there, and we tend to leverage them. Reason being is that not every application fits every single scenario. So we have to look at the scenario, look at what best fits the client, and then utilize those particular solutions to bring about the best results as we can possibly bring.
Thank you so much for that. FME, of course, before the pandemic, I wouldn't know what that is. I've learned something today. I'm sure many of us have. And I saw Mr. Heinz nodding in agreement with Mr. Small, so I want to pose to him here now. You know, what are some of the future GIS services you see coming out of this whole thing for your organization? I know I might be putting you on the spot, but tell us.
Future GIS services for the company. I believe the further miniaturization of the, I would say, mobile sensor platforms, or let's, for simpler terms, the GIS part of any element for, let's say, drones, your smaller handhelds, things like these I see as the development of the GIS space and getting the GIS platforms more integrated into the user space as far as the regular Joe who may not be au fait to some of the operations right now. So as I was mentioning before, some of the uses that are now we're seeing upcoming as a matter of the COVID-19 pandemic are seeing these different data sets or data that can be captured by users coming back to the companies depending on how they are interconnected with other companies. So I'm not necessarily thinking about a change in how it is used or a change in the platforms themselves, but I'm seeing increases or increasing data sizes or data sets in terms of the interconnectivity of different networks. For example, we utilize a lot of ArcGIS online systems, as the rest of the panel here was mentioning. We utilize QGIS, ArcGIS itself, Pro, and what I'm seeing is a lot of the user end elements that we may use on the daily are going to be coming around to give back data to the entities which you may have purchased or received these entities from, and therefore those companies being integral or in operation with, let's say, a Digicel, we would have now easier access to a city setup without having to survey it ourselves, or customer locations without having to survey it ourselves, or business locations without having to survey them for ourselves. So those are changes that I would see coming into the space, or as far as available for Digicel in the coming up years.
Okay, thank you. So that's from the communication angle. And now we want to hear about our money, the banking sector. For Ms. Josette, can you tell us, do you think that there would be no new offerings, more offerings in terms of service or training as a result of the whole different angles from which we have had to tackle the whole GIS?
Yes, I definitely believe so. I think or a lot of people would say that we're pretty much in the fourth industrial revolution, where the focus is on the internet and how the internet is changing the way in which we operate, the way in which we do business. And one thing that the internet brings is a lot of data. And so, and with the data that we have, there is usually a location element to it. And what I find is that GIS now will have to look into how do we integrate or make sense of the large amount of data that's now coming to us. We have to look at how the role that GIS will play in understanding big data. We have to look at how do we integrate the feedback that we constantly get from our customers to GIS. So I think that the skills that we have in GIS, we might have to expand. It might mean we have to learn some SQL and so on. We can't necessarily no longer rely on our IT professionals to get the data for us, but we have to learn how do we get this data ourselves. So it is really how GIS will work with predictive analytics in a way to provide greater value for people. Back in the day, there was a time when nobody looked at the location dimension of data. So we would sit and we would analyze data in our spreadsheet. With GIS coming into play, it added a new dimension. But now we have to have greater focus on how do we integrate this location element into the predictive analytics that we have. So for example, if we should look at what will probably happen at the end of the pandemic, we want to get out of the pandemic as quickly as possible, but we're having issues with vaccine hesitancy and so on. So we know that with time, we might have changes in the socioeconomic makeup of communities. And for us at JN, how has these changes in the socioeconomic makeup of communities impact or will impact housing values? The houses that we have mortgages on are considered our assets. And when you purchase your house at a particular value, it is important for us at the bank to ensure that it maintains its value or it appreciates. So with the possible changes in the socioeconomic component of communities, how do we map that against or integrate that, or how do we use that to predict what future housing value will be in particular areas if we are to continue with the pandemic for a long period of time? So it's really, for us, the changes in services are what we're looking forward to, is just greater integration in terms of how GIS works with other aspects of analytics.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. And Mr. Buchanan, I know you do a lot of training, and the pandemic has been here for quite some time. What are the new courses, new services? Do you see any of that coming to the fore?
Well, in terms of training, I wouldn't say, well, there are new things to train people in. So, but first, the trainers will have to learn these new things. The change that we're seeing now is how we impart the knowledge. So it's just a mechanism of imparting the knowledge. One of the things that I see emerging now that has become more important is real-time, what I call real-time GIS. In Jamaica, we tend to be on a weekly basis or a quarterly basis or annual basis, and COVID-19 pandemic has really showed us that there are some huge gaps. There is no way that you can track COVID data on a weekly basis, and I'm sure the Ministry of Health can have long discussions with you about that. So one of the real examples, if I don't know if some of you know, but Facebook, for example, they have a feature where, let's say there's an earthquake in your city, you can actually go on Facebook and report that you're fine. so that your family members can see that you're safe. And that in itself is a geospatial technology, because you, the person, will be linked to your city, which is a location. So those, we need real-time things. The World Health Organization is also pushing a platform called Go Data, where you can actually map health crisis data on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. So those things is another thing that you need to look at. We're going to have to make things smaller, and we're already seeing that. All of the smart watches, they already have a GPS device in it. That's very critical data. We know that to procure satellite imagery and stuff like that is very expensive. So we're going to have to expand our investment in drones, in UAVs, so that we can actually get some of these products at the local level at a more affordable rate. And another key thing is greater collaborations. As we move forward in the future with geospatial technologies, we're going to have to focus on, people are going to have to focus on their strengths. We're going to have to learn new things, but people have to specialize. So we'll have a team working on that, and then we integrate, and the internet is a tool that we're going to use to integrate as we move forward. And I'll also like to quickly mention about two of the products that we would have worked on that came out of the pandemic. A system called SAFER that we developed at Mona Geoinformatics with the Violence Prevention Alliance. And this is looking at the nexus between crime and COVID-19. And the system was so successful that a lot of government agencies are now interested. And because it's a location-based system, it doesn't matter what kind of asset you're looking at or what kind of problem. It can be crime, it can be schools. We also use a system when Minister Favour Williams was looking at reopening schools. So we're looking at schools that have running water, schools that have internet, stuff like that. And another system that we recently completed is one called the NEIS in St. Lucia and the rest of the Eastern Caribbean. That's a national environmental information system that looks at aggregating a lot of government and environmental data to show people where their risks are in terms of health risks or environmental risks. So those are some of the key things that we would have focused on during the pandemic.
And the rich discussion continues. We could be here for all afternoon, but there is a cutoff point. And at this point, I will pause to take questions from our online community, and I'll just throw it open. The first one is, how and when will Jamaica get base data right? We are trying to build, sorry, let me do that again. How and when will Jamaica get base data right? We are trying to build new grand applications when our base data either does not exist or is outdated. I don't know if any of the panelists want to take that on.
I'll give it an attempt. I think this will be a question for the government agency, but from what I know, I think the government has invested a lot of resources in getting things right. It's a working process, and there's a lot more work to be done. I know there are several rules and regulations in place. For example, if we're mapping some data by community, then we know that we can use the PIOJ community boundary, or we can use the SDC boundary, and that is a standard that does not change unless those organizations change that standard. So to me, at Mona Geoinformatics, for example, we have certain base data that adhere to the national standards, but maybe that the person that asked that question would need to provide some more clarification. But I think there are a lot of things in place now that is going right, and our head of the LICJ board also reported that there are new investments in tools that they can use. So I think things are coming on board, but there's a lot of work to be done.
Thank you for that, Mr. Buchanan. I hope that the person found that useful, but we will leave some details at the end. If you weren't satisfied with your answer, we could explore it some more. This question is from Mr. Heinz. So a colleague of mine is doing research about how the digital divide has affected the schooling of children in the area of Durham, Portland. During a field visit there recently, we found that a large number of children have no access to internet. As such, they are unable to go to class. Can GIS be used to aid them in obtaining a better bandwidth so they can attend classes? And this is from Nathaniel Reed.
Okay. First, I would start with the actual existence of the network within the area. And yes, there may be some improvement that would need to be carried out on the system itself. However, some of the times, not having the actual service at your premises or having the bandwidth to actually utilize the internet services as you may require may be some other limitation that you may be facing, right? So as far as the GIS being able to help them with bandwidth, that would mean the GIS is going to be used to carry out some analysis at the organization level of the quality of the network that is provided along the footprint of the network and at the locations where this service is then available. Within those locations, the GIS will be able to capture these locations of any customers that would have these queries or these limitations to then provide back to the company for areas of improvement to be actually pinned down instead of it being word of mouth and spending or utilizing expenditure and going into possible areas where we wouldn't have the uptake. So some of the times what it is that it's not just that areas are excluded or they are not thought about, but sometimes the company has to also look at the revenue that they would receive and the expenditure that it would mean in terms of building the network and possibly not having the uptake to support the network to allow you to continue to have the bandwidth that is relevant. So yes, I would say the GIS is available to help them to provide the locations and have some assessment and decision making upon the business level, but I'm not at the level to say that just utilizing the GIS to have those locations will definitely mean that you're going to have an increase in your bandwidth.
Okay, thank you for that. I hope, Mr. Nathaniel, that would have been useful to you. You realize it's not just one factor at play in deciding or determining where the bandwidth is improved, but Mr. Heinz would have highlighted the many different factors, including expense, profitability. You know, how does this impact his business in terms of getting you the internet you desire? Another question here from the audience is, this is directed to Ms. Josette. Is the JN representative speaking of the ArcGIS indoors solution? If so, could she elaborate on its effectiveness and if it was a worthwhile investment? If not, what spatial analytical tools were used to recreate an indoor spatial management map?
Oh, so I think the person is referring to the question or to the discussion point where we spoke about spatial planning in terms of how we utilize our buildings. And so the technology that we use, the GIS technology that we use is ArcMap. In terms of what we're looking at is actually the locations of the buildings and not necessarily the internal footprints. So it's not how people utilize the space within the buildings, but in terms of the locations of the buildings in relation to each other. So it's really about, so we have a number of locations. We have over 35 branches. We have what you call back office departments that people work in. So it is really how do these buildings themselves, how do they, all right, so it is, based on the question, what I'm hearing from the question is they want to know if it's a floor plan. I would hope. That is a floor plan they're trying to figure out if we had a GIS solution to help with the floor plan. But what we're saying is no, we use ArcMap to look at the correlation between where our buildings are, their utilization, and how we use the space, and are we getting the most best efficiencies from them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Tamira, I hope that answers your question. We'll invite you with further details for discussion if it hasn't. And so time is up on us and we'll have to wrap up. And so I give each of the panelists a minute to answer a question from April Walker. What do you see as the future of GIS in Jamaica? So we'll begin with Mr. Heinz.
Okay. I'll go back to the point that I was making before in terms of the further miniaturization of the mapping tools and the different elements that they may be integrated with, and that being a cause for GIS being more utilized by the everyday person and in new machines or new elements, or, as was mentioned by Luke, new watches. And the next part that I'm interested in is the real-time revolution or spatial temporal data, which would allow us to create better patterns in terms of decisions that we're trying to make.
And thank you for that question, April. What I will say is GIS, the future of GIS, I believe in Jamaica is bright, because if there has never been a time for GIS to shine, I think now is the time for GIS to shine in terms of navigating this pandemic. And so what I think has happened is that more people are aware of the importance of location in making decisions and how it impacts us. And so I believe that the uptake in terms of the use of GIS in mainly probably the private sector, because I think GIS is well utilized in government. However, in the private sector, I believe that we will see more people or more organizations actually using GIS to help them to inform their decisions, to add another dimension to the analytics that they conduct, to help make sense of the chaos of all the data that they have. And GIS has proven to be a valuable part of looking at the location dimension of your data and enhancing what you already know, as well as allowing you to think about new ways of looking at your business and so on. So I believe that the future of GIS in Jamaica is actually going to be growing as we exit or continue to navigate this pandemic.
Yes, the future of GIS for me is the greater integration of geospatial services into all sectors of life. Autonomous driving, I raised that point before. Artificial intelligence, AI, I'm looking forward to the integration of geospatial technologies and AI. Expecting greater collaboration between different agencies and between different players in the industry. And I'm also looking for greater development in UAVs in Jamaica, especially on the regulation side. So that is what I'm looking forward to.
Mr. Small.
Thank you for that question as well. In terms of what I visualize for the future for GIS, I think of it from a multifaceted approach, in the sense that we have to look at, I think the question was touched on before in terms of how we collect data. And Mr. Buchanan had spoken about the different standards that are there, but reinforcing those standards are very important. Ensuring that how we collect the data is at that standard, because it doesn't matter what kind of technology we use, if the data is not good, then we're not going to present good data in the first place and we can't analyze it properly. So I do see a future where it is that we are upholding those standards so that when we're utilizing the advanced technologies that have been mentioned before on the panel, then we can actually get meaningful and real value from that so that we can help the society to continue to benefit. And I'll touch on some of those data sets that I think are very important and I think that are underutilized currently. The parcel database system that we have, it is a very important data set that can be used for many different things. We can use it for navigation, we can use it for tracking assets on different parcels, we can use it for statistics for population in terms of down to that granular level of having it on a particular parcel. And I think if we start to look at these base data sets that we have and really think about how we can really utilize them, then we can definitely see a bright future in how we utilize those advanced technologies to provide that meaningful data that we can then get real value from. And that's what I foresee. And I know myself want to play a part in that. I know everybody on this panel wants to play a part in that. And Mr. Buchanan had mentioned about collaboration. Mm-hmm. That is very important. I really want to reiterate that. If we don't have that collaboration between the private entities and the government entities to inform one another what are the best practices, then we can't really move forward. So I really do see that in the future.
Okay, thank you for that. And as we wrap up, there is one final aspect which we'll have to address. I hope you all, there's a question from the chairman, and it says, how has the companies used GIS to address the mental health and well-being of its employees? So I'm hoping that each of you from the various organizations could address that as our final point as we close out. So mental health and wellness, it has been at the fore of our discussion. How has GIS helped in that?
Well, I'll answer quickly. One of the things that we have done internally and for some of our clients is we have done a geospatial analysis of where a workforce lives. And we know that somebody that lives significantly further from work may go through different levels of stresses in getting to work, in addition to pandemic. So when you develop a model, a distance from work model, then you can develop certain systems so you can provide additional support for people that live very far, if we're just thinking about the distance. And it will be the same for any other factor. So we have done models for large companies and for our own company, just to assist people to say, well, if you live this distance and you have to reduce, you have the curfew hours, then you may just come in 2 days for the week, stuff like that, just to make things easy on the person so they can focus on their work.
Joseph?
Similar to Luke, what we have done is we have also mapped our staff members in terms of where they live. And I know earlier in the discussion we had said that we looked at how employees are performing in terms of productivity and where they live, but also we have looked at how employees who have actually caught the disease and where do they live in relation to where these hotspots are located, or where do they work in terms of where these hotspots are located. And so we are being able, through our risk department, being able to reach out to who we believe will be the more vulnerable people. We have tried to ensure that the branches that we think are most exposed are sanitized more often. We have also tried our best to ensure that we provide the information to our staff members in terms of how do you protect yourselves and your family. And a lot of that has been enabled by the fact that we know where they are and we can actually see it easily in terms of this is where everybody is at a glance.
Mr. Heinz, thank you. Thank you.
At GSL, I wouldn't say that, well, unfortunately, I wouldn't say that we have specifically used GIS platforms to actually assist the workflow or the work schedule of those that would be coming into the office or staying out of the office. The company has utilized different strategies to ensure that those personnel that are in good enough distance to make it to work and home on time, those that have other limitations that will stop them from actually being in the office, these can be reported. More than likely some GIS or geospatial location may be a part of that which was submitted, but as far as a platform itself, no. So in that, initially we would have received emails and notifications letting us be aware of contact tracing, or if there has been some other limitation and we are not to come into the office. Beyond that, whilst it got more intense, then the company developed a plan which is working and seemingly holding place, where they allowed each team to basically split itself down the middle and allow half of the team basically to be at work on one week and the other team the next week. So automatically it falls into the social distancing which came after that, where every other seat would be empty. So as far as being at the office, that wouldn't be an issue. You have another week at home, and if it is that you're unable to be a part of working inside the office, then you have your managers and HR and other escalations to communicate with.
Okay, and Mr. Small.
So prior to the pandemic, we had built an application called PeopleFlow, which actually manages office spaces where persons are located within the office by means of sensors, gateways being attached to the ceiling, as well as persons have data tags that they walk around with that can track where you are within the office. So that we have utilized from a testing perspective and not necessarily from the pandemic perspective. As Mr. Heinz had mentioned, that he would have, in their offices, look at where the particular location of the person's setup is, and then they would have every other desk being open. We have that similar approach, and we would have also tested that, utilizing the PeopleFlow application as well, just to see what kind of scenario that would play out to be. One of the other things that we would have done is when the pandemic started, we retrofitted that application to do contact tracing, where we did that for a hospital to be able to provide different scenarios of where you could track from the data source of the initial person who would have been infected, providing from a spatial perspective what persons are at a higher risk in terms of how that person could be infected, as well based on how long they would spend within a particular area, and in terms of the distance between, say for instance, a person sneezed or coughed, what is that distance that could allow for somebody to be infected, and what are the procedures that are in place. So we have those applications in place. We test them at our facilities, but then we utilize them with our clients.
Okay, so from this we can gather that for some of the organizations, the whole issue of mental health and well-being were addressed. From the discussion here, others would have gotten ideas as well as to how to implement this going forward, because without a proper mental health or well-being, who are we? This brings us to the close of this section of the program, and once again I'd like to thank our panelists, our online community, for joining us here. Our panelists, Mr. Luke Buchanan, Senior Projects Manager, Mona Geoinformatics Institute, Mrs. Josette Smith-Scott, GIS Business Analyst, the Jamaica National Group, Mr. Marlon Heinz, Manager of Home Entertainment and Fixed Networks, Digital Jamaica, Mr. Sheldon Small, Technical Consultant, GIS Developer, Real Decoy. Thank you. At this point, I will invite Ms. Simone Lloyd, who is the Principal Director Acting of the National Spatial Data Management Branch, to come by, do the closing remarks, and give the vote of thanks.
To our able Master of Ceremony, Mrs. Patrine Cole, GIS Analyst for the Planning Institute of Jamaica. Dr. Alwyn Hales, our Permanent Secretary within the Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change. Ms. Juliet Mayer, our Chairman for the Land Information Council of Jamaica. Mr. Adam Reedy, the National Government Business Manager for the Americas and the Caribbean region for Environmental Systems Research Institute, as our keynote speaker for today. Our geospatial experts joining us locally, regionally, and internationally. Our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for being with us this morning. Sound planning, partnership, and collaboration were integral for the successful staging of this event. We are very proud as a ministry, under the leadership of our Permanent Secretary, Dr. Alwyn Hales, and under the leadership of our Chairman of the LICJ, Ms. Mayer, in addition to the hard-working members of the National Spatial Data Management Branch, who are very pleased that you were able to take time out of your very busy morning schedule to join us for the first staging of the 11th GIS Business Executive Forum. The entire process of planning and execution would have taken us months, and with that, it could not have been possible without the hard-working support of our partners, our stakeholders, and our team members who would have brought and who would have bought into the vision of a Jamaica that utilizes geospatial information, tools, and technologies to more efficiently and more effectively chart our journey, especially within the context of this new normal towards further national development. This function would not have been possible without the presence and the support of our Master of Ceremony, Mrs. Patrine Cole, our Permanent Secretary, our Chairman of the LICJ, Adam Reedy, our keynote speaker, but especially also our esteemed panelists who would have carried us through a journey of listening to the path of which their individual companies would have taken in sojourning through this new normal, in adapting, evolving, and continuously changing to really respond to the various needs of their entity and of their individual staff members as they provide various services, products and services to us, the community of which they serve. To the National Housing Trust and the National Land Agency and Real Decoy, we thank you for your partnership and sponsorship of this year's activities. We would not have done this without you, and so we thank you for your journey with us. To all members of the Land Information Council of Jamaica and other entities of the government of Jamaica who would have provided invaluable support over the past almost 30 years journey of Jamaica's geospatial sojourn, we express sincere gratitude, and especially as the LICJ looks forward to celebrating our 30th anniversary in 2022. To our viewers, we appreciate you taking this time to be with us. We thank you for the questions posed and for all the insight of which you would have provided to us given your questions. So given all the questions we would have received of which we would have posed to our panelists, we are confident that you would have learned and you would have benefited from what our panelists would have shared, and with that would have come your questions, which would have helped us to delve more into what the new normal looks like and how it is that our panelists, through their different efforts, would have been responding to that. As we successfully close the first event, we welcome your participation in our other 3 events. The 8th GIS Technical Seminar, which will be held this Thursday from 2 to 4 p.m. virtually. Our annual Geography Awareness Week Thanksgiving service, which will be held this Sunday, November 14th at 10:30 to 1 p.m. from the New Testament, from the Eastwood Park New Testament Church. We welcome your joining with us as we live stream from that particular church. On the 17th of November, we close our events by having the 19th National GIS Day Exposition from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. So if you have not registered as yet, we welcome you to register and to participate in all the other remaining activities. And so we thank you. We thank you for your partnership. We thank you for the collaboration over the many years, and we look forward to continuing on this path. Your support has been invaluable, and it is appreciated. So again, we thank all our contributing moderators, our speakers, our partners, our stakeholders, our sponsors, and all who have joined us again today. And so we thank you for being with us. And as we close out this morning's event, we welcome you to participate in our other remaining 3 events. So thank you. Thank you for being with us on this journey. And we hope for you a very blessed day. Bye, everyone.